In this lecture, we're going to be reviewing the concepts behind SP Connect or Adobe Connect Pro. As we've discussed previously, Adobe Connect Pro, or SP Connect as we call it here at the university, is a virtual collaboration tool. Its purpose is intended to bring teams together in an efficient, effective manner to allow them to collaborate on joint projects, joint efforts, to allow them to meet at times that may not necessarily be convenient to meet in person, and so on. Virtual collaboration is an extremely important characteristic of modern business. It is used extensively in the business community to interact not only with other departments and interact with other business units, but would also multinational corporations employ it extensively to communicate between their domestic units. It's also used to communicate between prospective customers, employees, and so on. So understanding collaborative online software like Adobe Connect Pro will benefit you not only in enhancing your quality of assignment delivery, but also in terms of being able to effectively participate in online meetings in the business community. As we have previously discussed, Adobe Connect Pro, or SP Connect, essentially is composed of layouts and layouts that contain pods. Those are essentially the two elements that are in these collaborative virtual environments. You can think of a layout as your screen. What is it that you have on your screen? For example, you may open up Microsoft Word, you may open up Microsoft PowerPoint, you may open up Microsoft Excel. So your screen basically is showing you three applications that you have open. Now, again, you may have different sizes. They may be full screen, they may be sharing the screen, whatever the case may be, you have three applications opened on your screen. Now imagine if you also had a second screen. And on that second screen, you could open up, for example, some type of media. You could also open up a web page. So on one set of screens, you have your three Microsoft Office applications open. On another screen, you may have your web applications open. On a third screen, and so on. So basically, think of Adobe Connect Pro as a tool that enables you to have multiple screens or layouts, and on each and every one of those layouts, you can have a multiple set of pods. Now, as we discussed, there are quite a few different pods or applications that are available to you in SP Connect. The most common that are going to be used, that you will be using, that are used typically in most business collaborative activities are the Share Pod, which allows you to upload PowerPoint, PDF, JPEGs, for example. The Notes Pod, which think of it as a notepad that allows you to take meeting notes, for example, allows you to jot down notes. A File Pod, which allows you to upload files and then have participants download those files, possibly for a later review or prior to meeting review time, and so on. You also have an administrative pod called the Camera Pod. Now, the Camera Pod allows you to essentially stream video. Now, the restriction to the Camera Pod is that if you are going to be streaming video and you're going to have multiple layouts, you need to have the Camera Pod on each and every layout so you do not disconnect the video stream when changing layouts. So really remember that is the one constraint that we have, is that if you're going to employ a video, you need to make sure you have your Camera Pod active on every layout that is going to be used during this meeting. We also have an Attendees Pod, which essentially lists the attendees, their roles. Each and every one of you in your meeting room is a host, so you can control the creation of layouts, the addition, the deletion of pods, and so on and so forth. You also can have presenters, which limits the functionality, and then you have participants, which are only individuals who are allowed to attend and are not allowed to essentially manipulate, change any of the functionality of the screens itself. You also have a chat or question pod. Now this is extremely useful, not in a traditional collaborative meeting, because in that traditional collaborative meeting, everyone has microphone capability, everyone has audio capability, but it really is used to pose a series of questions that will be answered subsequently. It also can be used in a case where for some reason someone's microphone is malfunctioning and needs to be able to participate. However, chat is not a very effective tool for a dialogue to take place. It is good to pose questions or list questions so that they can be answered at a subsequent point in time. We also have many other pods that can be used. One of the other ones, for example, is that is maybe commonly used called a poll pod. It allows the participants, the attendees to the meeting, to take a poll. So basically, in constructing your layouts, what you want to do is you want to be able to construct these layouts prior to your meeting so that there is no downtime, there is no delay, there is no delays in meeting and discussing various topics and so on. So you want to prepare, you want to plan your layouts, you want to plan the pods that are on your layouts, and then you want to be able to sequence them through your collaborative meeting. Let's take a look at a traditional Adobe Connect Pro window. As you can see, what we have here on the screen in this particular case is we have effectively a camera pod, as you can see from the top of the title here. We have the attendees list pod. We also have a notes pod, and we have a question pod. So basically, we're starting out the meeting, if you will, on this page. And as we can see, this layout is called agenda. So the agenda layout in this particular meeting room essentially has 4 pods. It has a camera pod, which we can use to start. It has, if you will, a notes pod, or basically to give the individual attending the meeting instructions on what to do and then what the agenda is going to be. An attendees pod, so that registration of each of the individuals automatically maintained by the system. And lastly, a chat pod, or in this case, one that's been relabeled a question pod. Now, as a host, you have the ability to move these around. As a host, you have the ability, for example, to come up here and hide them, maximize them, do all sorts of different elements. You can come here and take all of the questions that have been asked and have that sent as an email to the designated primary host. You can clear the chat room. So there are many different elements, many different capabilities that you have. So essentially, you construct this layout. And as you notice, you could put a JPEG as a background image so you can customize your room a little bit more effectively. At the top of the screen, you see the various layouts that you have previously created. You can bring those into play. You see all the lists of various pods and the pods that are active on the current screen that we have. And then you have the ability to look at audio, connect your speaker, which ones you wish to have, connect the microphone, connect your camera, and so on. And this, as we've seen in various classes, allows participants to communicate without necessarily using audio or without using any text information. So the key is this is your basic screen. And if you notice here on the left, we have a series of layouts. And remember, as we talked about it, the layouts represent a screen, so to speak, with functionality on that screen, in this case, namely the pods. If we go to the data layout, as you can see, the data layout is composed of, again, as we talked about it, the camera pod. It's composed of a share pod that happens to have a PowerPoint loaded in it. It has the attendees pod in it. It has a to-do list. This, again, is a notes pod. And as I said, a notes pod means that any host will be able to enter information. So it's a great place to keep a to-do list for the team. And then you have the previous question pod. We can jump to the next layout. And in this layout, for example, what we see is we see another share pod. In this case, it's looking at a PDF. We see attendees pod. We have a camera pod. And we also have, if you will, a file pod. And a file pod allows the participants, the attendees of the meeting, to be able to download a particular file. Or if they're hosts, they're enabled to upload files as well. And then last one, again, we have another pod over here that basically just shows different information. So see what the pods are doing. The pods are providing us with capability. A share pod, a screen pod. Now, for you to upload something from your computer, you come over here and you say, share my screen, you say, share a document, and then you can browse your computer. Allowing you to browse your computer allows you to essentially select. Now, you will see previous uploaded information from previous meetings. Again, this is administrative. You may eventually want to clear these and so on. But basically, you can share it. You also can share your screen. And by sharing your screen, everyone in the meeting will see exactly what it is you're doing. So, for example, you may want to show an Excel spreadsheet. You may want to be able to explain how to enter information into a particular cell. So what you can do is share your screen, and then everyone in the meeting will essentially be seeing what exactly you're doing. You can also create a pure whiteboard as opposed to a drawing on it. And a pure whiteboard is exactly what it implies. It allows you to electronically write on the screen, and every host can, and those who have been given appropriate permission. So the idea behind it is the layouts give you the functionality that you need. The layouts allow you to do a number of different tasks. So, for example, one of the tasks that you can perform, again, is you can keep these synchronized or you can keep them asynced. Keeping them synchronized means that one individual controls it. Keeping it async means that each individual will, at their own pace, view the information as well, and what we can do with it and how we can handle it. We can resize all these different pods. And in this case, notice we can resize it. Notice you also have a draw tool. Now this allows you in a share pod, for example, to mark it up, annotate it, and so on. So for example, you can pick a highlighter. And so now what we've done is we've just actually highlighted the information. So it's a whiteboard on top of the PowerPoint or the JPEG or the PDF. But you can also have a pure and simple whiteboard only with no background material whatsoever. So essentially, when you look at all of this information pretty much gives you an opportunity to create layouts, which are effectively our screens, then allows you to create place pods on those layouts that are going to be performed as you scroll through it. And as you go through it, notice you're bringing up different functionality throughout. Now, these screens could all be preloaded with information. So, for example, we could have, in this case here, the view of financial information. And so this could be pre-laid. And so now we see this information. Now, the one thing about Adobe Connect Pro is that it is what we call persistent. That means whatever is done, unless someone changes it, is there the next time you come in. So for example, you log out, you come back into the meeting a week or two later, and you go through the various layouts. What you're going to see is whatever was left during the last meeting. So for example, we uploaded this accounting information. That appears there as well. Once you stop sharing, that disappears, and you now have cleared it. So the key behind it is objectives and goals are to design your meeting. And how do you design your meeting? You design your meeting by effectively creating layouts and then adding appropriate pods to the layouts. The only constraint is that if you're going to use a webcam, you must have this webcam on each and every one of the layouts that are going to be used in the meeting, so that way the video stream does not get disconnected. Let's take a look at some of the pods, in particular the camera pod, for example, and the question pod. The camera pod, notice, has a start webcam. On it, it appears the camera that is streaming the information. You start sharing that information, and you see the camera appearing, and you see the data as I'm discussing it. We can stop sharing it immediately, and that disappears. We also have, for example, a question pod, or we can actually change a name by double-clicking. And by double clicking at any one of the top of the pods, you can question this to be, for example, we can change it to be Q&A. And now that's going to be the Q&A pod that we have. Let's say we're interested, for example, in adding a files pod to this particular layout. We come up here to pods. Notice we have a share pod, so we can add a whole bunch of them. We have notes pods, attendees, camera. There really is only one of those. Again, you're not going to use the video, telephony, the chat pod we can add, but let's add a files pod. And so, for example, I have a previous file pod in here called lecture files. It's now going to be added. If you notice, there is no information on this. And so what we want to do is we want to move our pods so we can arrange them appropriately. So now we've added a files pod. The key is we now want to upload files. Again, this will upload historical files, or we can actually just go in and browse our computer, and you can go through whatever it is you're interested in doing, and so on. And so the key behind it is this is how you upload files. Now, again, most of this is going to be done before the meeting actually begins. Again, because I'm recording all of this, we're going to see some errors appear if I try to do certain things like the microphone and other file loading characteristics. But the key is we just added a pod. You wish to remove a pod from a particular screen, all you do is you come up here and you'll notice you have the hide option. So now you can hide it, the pod disappears, we can now expand this pod, and there off we go with it. Same thing holds true with layouts. If you're interested in adding a layout, you can create a new layout. And when you create a new layout, it says you can duplicate an existing one or create a blank one. And so what this is going to be a review layout. And so we're going to create a review layout. Now on that review layout, it's a blank screen. Now what do we need to do? Well, first and foremost, we always need to add a camera pod because we know we're going to be using camera. I may, for example, be interested in adding an attendees pod so I can see who it is. Now again, I don't want this to overlay. I may want to keep that in place. Now the attendees pod is very useful for a number of reasons. For example, if for some reason a member of the meeting has to step away, you notice there's a step away option. That means I have stepped away, so everyone attending the virtual meeting knows that I am not going to be available. Again, away from keyboard, if you will. So the key is an attendees pod is very useful because an attendees pod essentially allows individuals to communicate their status without interrupting the meeting. I also may want to add, for example, a share pod. And again, I have all sorts of different share pods that I can use. If you notice, I have tons of information over here and so on. So I can come in, I can take a look at a share pod. A share pod can be an overview pod, it could be a rank, I mean, whatever it is you want. If we take a PDF, it now shows a PDF that was previously marked up. The key is it comes in, I need to move it. I may want to expand my window so it appears to be a little bit bigger than that. However, whatever I'm interested in doing in creating my layout. And that's how essentially I create a layout and I add all sorts of pods. I also want to put a chat pod in here. Maybe I don't want the Q&A that we're using on the other screens. Maybe I want to add a new chat pod. So I add a new chat pod. And let's give this one, we're talking about this as being a review. So let's call this the review line, whatever it may be. So now if you notice, I have the review line. I can type in this case here, what are we doing next? And again, now that's going to appear in the review line chat. And so I've done that. I send it. It's going to appear there. Now, if I go to any one of the other layouts that has the other chat pod, notice it's not there. It says, when should the ad hoc meeting be set? I come to the review and notice. So you can have multiple functionality. As we talked to, you could have multiple Word documents open. You can have multiple PowerPoints open. You can have multiple pods with different functionality and names open. So the key behind it is you can share pods across layouts. You can have unique pods across layouts. The design is up to you, however you wish to do it. And so you can share these various elements. You can stop sharing these elements. You can sync it so individuals on this particular layout are going to have the ability to pursue and scroll through this SharePod at their own pace and so on. So the idea behind it is use your layouts, use your pods to be able to essentially craft the entire meeting. That is the key. One of the worst things that can happen on the internet is to have 10, 15, 20 seconds of silence. Immediately, every participant starts to believe they were disconnected. And that really is why we have this feature, these layouts with all these pods. So plan your meeting. Another important element of your meeting characteristics, administrative duties, is as it states over here, connect the headset, go through your various menu settings to determine the speed of your internet connection and so on. And obviously everyone, first of all, should be testing their microphone and camera. Now, here's a couple of points to remember. If you have multiple cameras connected to your computer, you can come over here and you can actually select which camera it is you're going to be using. You can also enable webcam for participants. You do not have to enable webcam for presenters and for hosts, but for participants who have really no authority, you can actually enable webcam capability, as you can quite a few other elements. Once you start your webcam, it appears over here as we saw that before. So that's relatively straightforward. The only thing to remember is to maintain a continuous stream of video throughout all your layouts. This voice and camera pod must be placed somewhere on the layout. Now, it can be extremely small also. We don't really need to see, a lot of information if you're not interested in it, but you need to have that camera and voice pod on every particular layout that is going to be deployed in this particular meeting. The other one, and even more important administrative task, is your microphone. Now, the key is if you have a headset, very similar to the headset you saw in my video before, that is fine for you to remain continuously hands-free. However, if for some reason you have an external microphone and you have external speakers, or let's say you're using the speakers on your computer as opposed to speakers in a headset, well, what's going to happen is when everybody is talking, you're going to be hearing their voice coming through your speakers, and that audio is going to be played back through your microphone. And that's going to then create, if you will, a tremendous number of echoes, which will then create problems in the meeting. So if you do not have a headset, if you are not employing a headset, then you must mute your microphone when you are not conversing. Otherwise, you're going to have an echo in the meeting that is going to be extremely disruptive, and it's going to be very difficult for those individuals who are speaking. Therefore, prepare your meeting room for each and every meeting. Make sure you have the desired layouts with the desired pods on each of the layouts. Make sure you have connected your headset and you know your audio is working fine. Make sure you've specified your internet speed. You've tested your microphone. Make sure if you do not have a headset that you mute your hands-free. And lastly, you test your camera. The key is in a virtual collaborative environment, the most important aspect is to be prepared, to have planned for it, and to essentially be ready for any exception that may occur.